Elite teams play elite football, even against lesser opponents. And believe it or not, this week's matchup against Virginia could be more telling than last week's victory over Miami. Is Carolina elite, or are they just really good? I'll explain what I mean. Let's do it.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Friday, October 20th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, and I want to thank you for joining us to get your Tar Heels content every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege to get started. Coming up on today's show, we're going to get you completely ready for this football game Saturday against Virginia. Our usual what to watch for. Going to give you a key matchup to watch for, a Shady Stat of the game to be on the lookout for, and of course, predictions for what's going to happen. But before we get there, let's hit a couple things. Want to make sure you might already know, that the secret scrimmage for Carolina basketball, secret scrimmage, not so secret these days anymore, but that's Saturday against Florida Atlantic, who's coming off of that Final Four trip last year. It's fall break for the Tar Heels, so folks, it's all here. 1 week from today is Carolina's exhibition against St. Aug's, and then 10 days later is the regular season opener against Radford. So buckle up. Football season is coming. Want to welcome all you everydayers in, along with those of you who are checking in for the first time or maybe multiple times. We're so glad you're here. Come join us. Make this a bigger part of your everyday. If you'd like to have more in-depth conversations, join us on the Locked On Tar Heels community Discord. The link is in the show notes. Would love to have you as part of that. All right, Carolina versus Virginia. It's the South's oldest rivalry. This will be the 128th matchup of these two schools, the second most played matchup in all of FBS, behind only Wisconsin and Minnesota, who have played 131 times. So right on the heels of the Badgers and the Golden Gophers. This game is going to be 6:30 p.m. Eastern on the CW. So hopefully you got that dialed up. I'm a YouTube TV user. I've already checked, and I've got it. So yay for me. Carolina leads the all-time series 66-57 and 4 ties, and the Tar Heels have won the last 2 straight. You might be aware of Virginia's struggles this year. They're 1-5 on the season, 0-2 in ACC play, losses to Tennessee, James Madison, Maryland, NC State, and Boston College. And then 2 weeks ago, beat William and Mary and is coming off an open week last weekend. Now, to be fair, Virginia only lost to NC State and Boston College by 3. And to be even more fair, they've had double-digit leads against James Madison, Maryland, and Boston College before losing all of those games. So Virginia should not be overlooked. Let me tell you a couple things about their personnel, and then I'll say some more about Carolina trying to prove that they're an elite team this Saturday. In terms of personnel, Tony Muskett should be Virginia's quarterback. He got hurt the first game of the season against Tennessee, but has been back for the last 2 and is at the top of the depth chart right now. If for some reason it's not him, Anthony Colandrea is who we would see under center. But again, we expect it to be Tony Muskett. Malik Washington is their leading receiver. In fact, he's the leading receiver in the ACC in terms of yardage, 44 catches for 668 yards and 5 touchdowns. Good stuff there for Malik. Going to have the Carolina secondary shut him down. In terms of running backs, most productive guys are Paris Jones, 41 rushes, 235 yards, and 2 touchdowns, or we call that a really good day for Omarion Hampton. And then the others, Kobe Pace, similar numbers, 59 carries, 211 yards, and 1 touchdown. Pace is the more likely receiving threat of the two. So that's a little bit of setup for you. But I want to get back to what I talked about in the cold open. Here's what elite football teams do. Yes, they win big time matchups in prime time against teams like Miami or other high level opponents. But you know what else they do? They dominate lesser opponents and leave no room for anyone to think that you were lucky getting away from a game like that. We might be thinking things like, it's Virginia, fine, whatever. But legitimately, I believe that we will learn as much about the mindset of the Tar Heels this week. I think we will learn as much or more than we did last week against Miami. You want to prove you're elite? Then take care of business. Do it in the first half. Leave no doubt. By the time we go to the locker room at halftime, this game should be over. By the time we get to the fourth quarter, I want to see Drake Maye standing on the sideline for the final 15 minutes of this game. That's what elite football teams do. I want people complaining about how Drake Maye's numbers are low from this game simply because he only played 45 minutes instead of 60. Although I do hope he racks up a ton in the meantime to help keep that Heisman hope going. But seriously, again, this is about wins. This is about continuing to prove you're elite and that you belong in the top 10 right where you're at. So don't mess around. Don't play down. You get up, you get a lead, and then you give no hope to Virginia. Because when a team that is inferior starts sniffing possibility, that's when things rise to the level, and that's when the better team plays down and escapes. That's not that cannot happen on Saturday night in Kenan Stadium. Another thing of this is like part of becoming elite and seen as elite is that this is a time to score some style points with the AP voters, with the CFP committee, with other coaches around the nation. You want them to stand up and take notice. Like, oh, I know that was just, only Virginia, but Carolina just blitzed them, right? That's what needs to happen. Part of this is we got to recognize there is a potential for letdown after the Miami game, right? You get up and ready and big for a game like that. And then there's a tendency to fall off in the next game. It's not the big game that you're worried about. It's the trapped game that comes after it, which this game clearly is. But I must say, I'm not concerned about that. I think the coaching staff has the players' attention. They all know, those that were around last year, and remember the feelings of those final 4 games, which, understandable losing to NC State. I don't like it, but I get it. Understandable losing to Clemson, understandable losing to Oregon. But what did it start with? The loss at home to Georgia Tech. It just simply cannot happen. So they all know and remember the feelings of those 4 losses, those last 4 games of last year, and they're committed to not letting that happen again. And here's the other thing. Right now, you've got to do this for 3 games straight, 1 game at a time. You cannot have a letdown against a lesser opponent, whether it's Virginia, Georgia Tech, or Campbell in a couple weeks. Also, while keeping in mind that if you're Carolina, you can't beat Duke this week. You can't beat Clemson this week. You cannot beat NC State this week. But you can continue to make those games matter at a big picture level. Because if you take care of business now, then those games matter. If you don't take care of business now, all those games matter for is not getting embarrassed the rest of the way. That just makes sense. Moreover, you don't get the bigger games you want after those 3 games. The ACC championship or a big time bowl game, or dare I say a CFP invite, unless you take care of things now. So it starts with Virginia, just this game, just this opponent, nothing else matters. Beat up on the Cavs. Speaking of all that, let me remind you of 2 other very important ACC matchups coming up on Saturday. 7:30 Eastern on ABC is 16 Duke at 4 Florida State, both undefeated, along with Carolina in ACC play, the final 3 undefeateds in conference play. Well, we're going to have at most 2 remaining as long as Carolina takes care of business, and either Florida State or Duke comes out of this with a conference loss. So that's important. And then half an hour later, 8 o'clock on ACC Network, is Clemson at Miami. Keep in mind, both of these teams, both Clemson and Miami, already have 2 ACC losses. What does that mean? One of them has 3 coming out of this. Like, that's how math works. You play a football game, you both got 2 losses. One of you now has 3. Who's it going to be? Well, for the Tar Heels, I would suggest it would be better if Miami wins this game. Why is that? Let me tell you. Carolina has a 2-game buffer in conference play on both of these teams, but they already hold the tiebreaker against Miami, meaning if they essentially have a 3-game lead on Miami, because Carolina would now have to lose 3 games to be behind Miami in standings. Whereas if Clemson has 3 losses, you would rather beat Clemson, but if you lose to Clemson, you're still then have a 2-game buffer ahead of them, assuming Miami wins this game. So I'm going to be a big Canes fan on Saturday night after cheering hard against them last week. So ultimately, all this to say, if Carolina wants to be elite, all due respect to Virginia, but this is a game where Carolina's biggest opponent is Carolina. You got to get out of your own way. No more 147 penalty yards. No, mental, physical errors of any kind. Be ready, be dialed in from the kick. Let's make it happen. Let's be elite. Let's let the nation know. All right, coming up next, it's our what to watch for, where I give you 4 things to be on the lookout for in Saturday's game that I think are critical or important to watch in terms of Carolina getting to victory. We'll get there in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by Betterhelp. You ever feel like your brain is just kind of getting in its own way, like making mental mistakes in a football game or something like that? Like you know what you should do, but you just can't do it? Well, therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. And therapy is not just for people that have suffered major life trauma. It can empower you to set boundaries, empower you to be the best version of yourself. Perhaps you've always thought of trying therapy, but you've never moved forward. Maybe you were worried about the stigma of it or what people might think. No, get rid of that. Now's the time. Give BetterHelp a try. It's completely online. It allows it to be convenient and flexible and based on your schedule. That's great. I recently had a friend, legitimately, this is a true story, who needed to switch therapists, and it was a whole thing that they had to figure out. But with BetterHelp, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege today to get 10% off your first month. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedoncollege. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of the Locked On Network. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. You can go ahead and put some bets down on the Carolina-Virginia game for this weekend. We'll make predictions in a little bit, but the FanDuel line is 23.5. Carolina's favored, and the over-under set at 56.5. I don't mind going ahead and tell you, I got the Tar Heels and I got the over. Let's make it happen. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and you can bet on all sorts of stuff like spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. I want to also remind you that today, hopefully you're listening to this in time, but today, Friday, 11 a.m. till noon Eastern, is Locked On College Football Kickoff Live, getting you ready for this weekend's college football action on every Locked On YouTube channel, including ours. Check it out. Get ready for this weekend of college football. All right, it's time for our what to watch for, where I give you 4 things to look for in this game. Number 1, Carolina's third down success on offense. The Tar Heels are currently 8th in all of FBS at converting their third downs. They've converted 48 out of 91 of them, which is good for 52.7%. So much of that is obviously Drake Maye or staying on script where you've got 3rd and short rather than 3rd and 47 or something like that. But it also helps to have guys like Omarion Hampton, who's a big bruising running back that can get chunks even on 3rd and short where defense are coming up against that. Having trustworthy receivers, whether it's the tight ends, whether it's any of these wide receivers, or even Omarion or British or whomever leaking out of the backfield. So keep an eye on this. How does Carolina continue to move the needle forward with third down conversion success? That's what to watch for, number 1. Number 2, I'm watching Carolina's defense to see if they can continue their great streak of lots of interceptions. 2 more last week against Miami. Elijah Huzzie had been doing work, had 3 picks in the 2 games prior to that. So through the 6 games of the season, Carolina has already achieved 9 interceptions. That's first in the ACC. You hearing me? North Carolina has the most interceptions in the ACC, and they're tied for 6th nationally. However, hear this. The majority of the teams ranked above Carolina nationally have already played 7 games. So amongst teams that have only played 6 games, Carolina is actually tied for 2nd in the nation. The only team with more is Oklahoma, who has 12. Great stuff by the Tar Heels defense, being opportunistic with picking off the ball. Would love to see more of that on Saturday against, Virginia. Let's make it happen. However, what to watch for point number 3. You need to be aware that interceptions might be hard to come by because why? Sacks. Let me tell you about it. Carolina has been doing a good job of getting to the quarterback. They hadn't been on it, quite frankly, doing a great job of getting the quarterback down since that South Carolina game to start the season. Did a little bit more with that on Saturday. Kamen Rucker was a man on fire again. But they should have great success against Virginia and Tony Muskett on Saturday. And that's why Carolina might not be able to grab many or any interceptions, because it's hard to have an interception if there's no ball to intercept, if Tony Muskett can't deliver the ball. Why? Let me tell you. There are 130 teams in all of FBS football. Virginia is a 116th out of those 130 schools in terms of sacks allowed this season. They've already allowed 22 in just 6 games. That's an average of 3.67 sacks allowed per game. Here's their numbers in their 6 games of sacks allowed: 4, 4, 2, 2, 6, and 4. So that means every game, it's not just that the average is high, it's that every game they've allowed at least 2 sacks a game. So that means, think back to that schedule. That means that, yes, James Madison had 4 sacks. Yes, William and Mary had 4 sacks. And the week before that, Boston College had 6. You think you're keeping Kamen Rucker out of that backfield? Congrats on you to trying, but it ain't going to happen. So, Kamen, fellas, have fun up front. Let's see all that depth moving in and out from the line. The linebackers, we expect to see Powell get there. We expect to see Cedric get there, Miles Murphy, whomever. Get these guys there. Hey, let's meet at the quarterback and get him down. Would love to have interceptions, but I'd honestly love to just him never throw the ball to start with. So that's what to watch for point number 3. And the last one, we started with a third down something. Let me give you a third something else for our 4th what to watch for. And it's third quarter scoring, where North Carolina has been phenomenal this season. In the third quarter, North Carolina has outscored their 6 opponents by a total of 71-24. They are doing work coming out of the locker room, making these adjustments. Obviously, we saw perhaps the most crazy example of that last Saturday this season, as Carolina came out of the locker room down 17-14 and then reeled off 21 points in the third quarter. Miami, meanwhile, had none. Well, here's the problem for Virginia on Saturday. Not only is North Carolina doing really well in the third quarter, Virginia is not doing well in the third quarter. The Cavs have been outscored 52-34 coming out of the locker room. Not exactly a recipe for success for the University of Virginia. That said, yes, you want to be great coming out of the locker room if you're North Carolina. But if you recall earlier in the show, I said this game needs to be over by halftime. So sure, come out of the locker room, dominate the third quarter, but don't rely on that. Again, I'm looking to see what happens in the third quarter scoring. But before we get there, take care of stuff early. And again, I said it, but Virginia has had early double-digit leads. They had a double-digit lead against James Madison. They were up 14-0 on Maryland and 14-0 against Boston College. But again, lost each one of those games. I don't want to have to rely on that comeback. I want to stop it from the get-go and Carolina be out and running. Let's see it happen. Cannot have Virginia, again, having any hope of this. Well, we need to get to our key matchup of this game. a Shady Stat preview. And of course, I want to give you my game predictions and get you set up with the weekend whip around to see what else is going on in Carolina athletics this weekend. We'll get to all that in just a second, right after I tell you that this episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by Birddogs, as I switch to the awesome Birddogs tech hat. Look at this thing, man. It's incredible. It's white. I love it. You got your coffee mug traveler from Birddogs that I'm actually drinking water out of tonight because that throat, man, it's still going. So here's the deal with Birddogs. I just went on a weekend getaway with my family last weekend to a cabin. My Birddogs pants were perfect for this excursion, for this trip. I wore them out on our hike that we went on. I wore them into town for lunch and then back to our cabin where we're just hanging out around a campfire watching college football. It was the perfect example to me of how Birddogs are awesome for literally any occasion. Not only are they super functional, but Birddogs make you look good, like legitimately. I feel so confident when I'm wearing them. Plus, right now, you get a free Birddogs water bottle with every purchase. And beyond the great fit and the creative fabric, I love Birddogs because they have this anti-stink sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. So while I was out walking around with my family, I'm feeling cool, I'm feeling good, and I'm not worried about smelling bad either. It's awesome. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter promo code lockedoncollege at checkout for a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. Once again, that's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take off your Birddogs. I guarantee you that. All right, key matchup of the game. Let me switch back to my other hat here. Here's my key matchup. North Carolina's offensive line and Omarion Hampton against the entire Virginia defense. Here's why. You remember last week, North Carolina played Miami. What had Miami's defense not done all season long? They had not given up not only 100 yards to a single rusher, but to an entire team. Prior to playing North Carolina, Miami had not surrendered 100 rushing yards all season long in a game. Let's flip that and look at Virginia, who has never allowed fewer than 100 rushing yards all season long. How's that for a change from one week to the next? Yeah, Virginia has given up at least 119 rushing yards in every game they've played. And once again, yes, that includes James Madison. And yes, that includes William and Mary. So now you do that and you come to face Omarion Hampton, who just got 197 rushing yards against that Miami defense that hadn't given up 100 to an entire team all season. So you see why this is the key matchup in the game. Virginia's pass defense is decent. They've had success this year, but they've not faced a Drake Maye. I think Drake's going to do just fine through the air, and he's going to get his. But I think this is a big-time Omarion Hampton day, and so that's why I'm keying in on this matchup of the offensive line against Virginia's defense, and then Omarion just moving through whatever holes he needs to. Would not be surprised in any way if he racks up 200 rushing yards again on Saturday. This could get ugly on the ground, so keep your eyes out for it. It'll be interesting to see what Drake's numbers are like in the passing game versus what the rushing game is like. And I say Omarion, but that could be British Brooks as well. You know, who knows what that's all going to look like on Saturday. All right, let me give you a Shady Stat preview. We always have our Shady Stat of the game on the back end of games, but I also like to often, when I can, give you a Shady Stat to be on the lookout for, something that you can watch. How about the Carolina defense? Let's get back to that. We talked about those interceptions we're looking for and the sacks that we're expecting. But I also talked about the third quarter and what you're looking for there. Let's move ahead. How about this Carolina defense? This will be game 5 in Kenan Stadium this year. In the prior 4 games that Carolina's played at home, do you know how many first quarter points the Tar Heels have allowed? 0. In the first quarter, the 4 games, the first quarters that Carolina has played at home this year, 0 first quarter points allowed. Now, remember I told you that a couple games Virginia's gotten out to these early leads. Cannot happen. Shady Stat of the game, watch to see if for a 5th game at home this season, the Tar Heels can go without allowing any first quarter points. I cannot wait to see it happen. All right, let's get to game predictions. I said it in the FanDuel read already, but let me remind you one more time. North Carolina is favored by 23.5 points. That is a steep spread, and the over-under is 56.5. Let's go back to the beginning of the show where we talked about Carolina working to get elite. If Carolina is who we think they are, who we want them to be, who they want to be, not just a good football team or a great football team, but a truly elite top 10 football team, then they will cover this spread. Again, this is where we learn who the Tar Heels truly are in a game like this, in a game like Georgia Tech, in a game like Campbell. Now, you know that the Tar Heels have scored 30 or more points in every game. They've also scored 40 or more points in 4 of the 6 games, including every ACC game. So for me, until somebody stops it from happening, Carolina's just going to keep doing it. So I think they hit that again, that 40 plus. And in so doing, by the way, set a Carolina program record for number of games starting the season scoring 30 or more points in a row. The previous record, they're currently tied with 19-14 right now for 6 games. This will be 7. I have a Carolina blowout, 45-17. It makes sense if you think about it, but you got to do it. You got to be elite. I think it's a runaway at halftime. I do believe, though, that Carolina covers and that 45 plus 17 is 62, so that hits the over. Very quickly, let me also give you a weekend whip around now that we're ready for the football game and all that action about other sports stuff going on for Carolina this weekend. Field hockey is in action actually at Virginia on Friday today at 4 p.m. on ACC Network Extra. Should be a big game there. Both soccer teams are in action on Sunday. Women's soccer hosts Syracuse at 1 p.m. on ACC Network Extra. And then following that, men's soccer hosts Louisville at 5 p.m. on Sunday on ACC Network Extra. Volleyball is down south. They're at Clemson on Friday, 7 p.m. on ACC Network Extra. And then at number 13, Georgia Tech on Sunday at 1 p.m., also on ACC Network Extra. The tennis teams are once again in action for some of their fall portion of their schedule. Obviously, the main part of their action for the academic year is in the spring, but they do play a good bit in the fall. So kicking up is the ITA Regional Championships going on this weekend. The women are in Chapel Hill, the men are in Cary, and it'll carry over for a good week or so. So they're just getting started with that, and we'll keep tabs on it. Friends, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels. That's it for this week on Locked On Tar Heels. I want to thank you again so much for joining us. You everydayers, man, it's always so good to be together, including those of you who are joining this Discord. Seriously, it's a blast getting to have these conversations all the time. Would love for you to come be part of our conversations leading up to and during the Virginia game on Saturday. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Heels. Follow me at Isaac Schade. If you'd like to have other kinds of conversations, would love for you to email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe on video and audio. Smash the like button if you're watching, and we'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on this game. What's it going to look like? How's it going to play out? I want to know your thoughts. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be back with you with recap action over the weekend, but until then, peace.